And I remember standing in my living room and I was in tears because it dawned on me that I really did have this problem and that I was in trouble. You know what I mean? Like it had its hooks in me. I felt like it's hard to describe, but I felt like something other than human in that moment.
Welcome to Outside In, conversations of courage, hope, and overcoming addiction. The show where we flip the script on addiction and get personal about what really drives human change. Today's conversation is one that hits close to home for many. If you've ever watched someone you care about spiral through addiction and felt powerless to help, you are not alone. Joe Ortiz is a seasoned addiction interventionist who's been on the front lines of recovery for years. He works not just with individuals in crisis, but with the families, friends, and colleagues who love them and want to help without enabling, pushing them away, or giving up. If you've ever wondered, what do I say? What if they're not ready? How can I help without losing myself? You are in the right place. Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we've had an opportunity to talk over the last few weeks, and you've shared a little bit about what it is that you do and how you got involved. How did you get involved into the addiction space? And just share with our audience a little bit what that road was like for you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I guess where it really started was with my own personal journey into recovery. I struggled with alcohol and drugs for a long time, 20 years actually. Tried getting sober for 9. When I say try, I mean went to rehabs, went to outpatient programs, went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and with established periods of sobriety and then relapse again, which unfortunately is not uncommon. But 12 years ago, I hit, that proverbial bottom that we talk about so much, right? And I
Yeah.
recovered 12 years ago. And after having been in healthcare for 35 years now, 5 years ago, I made the decision to come into this space of healthcare, if you will. Originally, and when I say this space of healthcare, I'm talking about mental disorders and substance use disorders. And it's not the space that I was in regards to healthcare before that. I was a clinician of another sort, not a mental health clinician, a respiratory therapist. And so, yeah, I made the decision 5 years ago, originally in a marketing type role. It's called outreach in our field, where you're out and speaking to people about, a particular rehab that you might be representing. And that's what I started off. But what I discovered, I don't know, within the first 6 to 8 months of it was that I knew I'd be interacting with the client themselves, the person who potentially needed treatment for their substance use disorder, possibly a bit with the families. I didn't realize how much, and there was a lot of that. And I enjoyed it. I found that I started to have success in helping people accept the help that they needed by helping their families change what they were doing first, right? How they were approaching the problem, you know.
Now, having that firsthand experience, which so many people do have in the recovery addiction space, what was that like in how that first, let's take a step back, I guess, is in your own recovery and in that time when you were debating with that internal struggle that so many have in, do I need help? Do I need it? Not need help? Am I addicted? Do I have a problem? What was that like? And did you have anybody from the outside in your circles approach you at some point to say, "Hey, Joe, it sounds like you're not thriving right now. There's signs we're noticing." Did anybody bring things to your attention that raised flags in your own life that said, "You know what? I do need help"?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people actually, primarily my loved ones, right? My parents, my siblings. At the time, my wife, I was married for 10 years. They started to bring it to my attention. My ex-wife especially, right? Because she met me and we had a great time leading up to the day we got married. And I think that she had this vision like, okay, here's this guy, this great guy, and he parties, and then he likes to drink, or I heard that once we get married, he's gonna change type thing. I think a lot of people think that, and
And you got married young, right? I mean, you were younger when you got married, like a lot of people are when they're partying. Is that right?
um, I wasn't that young. I was, let's see, 34, 33, 34 years old.
Okay, so not that young, but you were still thriving and had a lot of energy and didn't have kids yet at that point.
Well, actually, yeah, I did have kids. I had a
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I was a single dad at that point too. I started very young. It's a long story. But I've always been a very hands-on dad, or at least tried even through my addiction. So to answer your question though, yeah, people were concerned about me. And, as my addiction took off, as it escalated, I started to have those conversations. And then it wasn't just with my loved ones, right? It was also with, my bosses, right? Yeah, calling in or coming in late or, job performance was being affected. I think that like a lot of people, I started off as a young man,
Mhm.
just having fun, right? Like we talk about turning 21 and, all that. And I can honestly tell you, I didn't see my addiction to alcohol coming. I thought I was like
Sure.
everybody else, right? We're going to go out on a Thursday night. We're going to go out on a Saturday night, once a week.
Sure.
But then once a week slowly turned into 2 times a week and then 3 times a week. And before I knew it, I was drinking just about every day, and towards the end, I absolutely was drinking every single day. So anyway, I feel like I've digressed a little bit maybe, but to answer your question, a lot of people were concerned and it was my ex-wife in 2004. We got married in December of 2003 and by March 2004, she was attending Al-Anon. She was going to Al-Anon. But it take very long from the point we got married to when she started to take a different action, if you will. I guess she realized like this guy, we got married and he's not changing, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, and then that March, I also started to see a counselor. I went to a drug and alcohol counselor, and I started to try AA. I started going to AA reluctantly. Like you mentioned the debate, right? The great debate. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that great debate was definitely on. It had been on for a long time because for a while, even before I decided to, or actually I was pushed into trying to do something about it. I, at that point, knew like, yes, something's up with me, but I wasn't really willing or ready to do anything about it. Yeah. So in 2004, I was kind of pushed into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was pushed into counseling. And I remember that December of 2004, standing in my living room, having had just put 90 days together and then relapse. And I relapsed really hard, you know. And I remember standing in my living room and I was in tears because it dawned on me that I really did have this problem and that I was in trouble. You know what I mean? Like it had its hooks in me. I felt like it's hard to describe, but I felt like something other than human in that moment. You know what I mean? Like I just felt like
Did you feel that there was outside stress contributing to that relapse at that point? Like, did you feel a trigger? Was there something that you were like, wow, you know what? 90 days, I could care less. The blinders are off and I'm just going for it. Or was it more of a sense of, you know what? The trickery of the brain often that I've heard from other people that are really struggling is, you know what? I could have a drink. I deserve a drink. Yeah, I've been good. The 90 days, like,
Mhm.
man, I'm good job.
Yeah,
And so was it the stress or was it the trickery?
it was both.
Or maybe a little both?
It was both, right? Because again, early on in my pursuit of sobriety, if you want to call it that, or being pushing into sobriety is really how I see it more. Like the first couple of years, I was reluctant, right? I was like, that debate was going on. So to answer your question, there were still reservations within me. Like, am I really?
Mhm.
It's been 3 months. Like, I haven't had a drink. And then there was the stressors of life, right? Which for a person who has developed a dependency on a substance, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, right? To cope with life, right? Because by the time that this all started to happen, this whole journey into sobriety happened, I used it for everything. I used it for a stressful day. I used it for a happy day. If I was sad, whatever the life,
Just totally integrated into
so like,
life.
pay the bills, let me go grab a drink now, all of that, right? All of it. So now you remove the alcohol, my biggest crutch to deal with life, and I'm left with nothing, right? To help me with that. I didn't have the coping mechanisms that I should have had at that point in my life. And so the stress was incredible. You know what I mean? Like the stress of just life. I hope that makes sense. I think that a lot of people who don't develop, a dependency like I did, what are you talking about? That's just life, Yeah, life. again, someone who is dependent on a substance to deal with all that, all of a sudden it's gone. You're left like feeling stressed, overwhelmed, and then you eventually pick up again, right? Because I have no coping mechanisms, right? Or very little. And so you pick up again.
Yeah, and I know personally, looking at loved ones that I had that were slowly falling into that trap of addiction, I looked at it as like, why don't you just stop? I truly looked at it as a choice. But what we're finding out, and the evidence points to, science points to the fact that a certain amount of people just once they touch it, that they have a biological attraction to it more than other people. And that's really where the addiction and the what do you want to call it, genetics, or that we're certain people are prone to that attraction to whatever that cycle is, right? Of whether it's gambling, sex addiction, whatever the addiction is, of that repeated response and that repeated go-to for a crutch. Whereas somebody who has gone out and had a few drinks on a Friday and they wake up on Saturday and they start to do bills or whatever, they're thinking, you know what? That's not even thinking about it, let alone going to act on my thoughts if they do. And I saw it with, again, my own loved ones and friends in my own circles, was of them just not being able to turn it off. And early on in my understanding of addiction was, I just looked at it as a choice, and personally frustrated and angry with people in my life who were making what appeared to be a choice between our relationship versus their relationship with alcohol or substances. What role, would you say that the people in your life played in your denial to the fact that you had a problem? Because of course, internally you are struggling, right? And you're going back and forth. Do I have a problem? Do I not have a problem? Oh, I can stop. I can't stop. I need help. I don't need help. And then the outward pressure of people in your circles, wife, friends, family, that were putting on that for you to take action in getting control over what was becoming a full-blown addiction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The primary outside force was my ex-wife, right? Because we're living together, right? We have a couple of small kids now in the house. She didn't sign up for that, right? She signed up for, the happy, healthy life, right? Married, the American dream. Let's buy the house, let's do all that. She didn't sign up for everything else that came with that if you married me, which was the constant drinking, the chaos that it would create in our relationship. I was always an isolator type drinker. I wasn't, this crazy or violent kind of guy. But, when you're drinking in the house, right? And you're around, but are you present? Right? You're there. Yeah. But are you there? You're there. Not really. Not really. Even if you're trying, you're not really fully there. You're not really fully engaged. You're not really, being the partner that your wife is looking for, right? Or husband, So she was the biggest force, but then again, there was my family, right? My parents would express concerns, and, an intervention was done for me, I think I may have shared that with you.
What
And
did that intervention, when, and I think if I recall, you saw it coming, whereas some people are totally blindsided by it. Was that right? You actually had an inkling when you walked into your own intervention that this was an intervention. This wasn't a let's go to the amusement park today, or let's go out for dinner. You truly walked into the fact of, wow, something's happening here, and we are not going to the amusement park.
yeah, 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 no, we were definitely not going to the amusement park that evening. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know, like, I didn't have an inkling, or I didn't know until the moment when I got here. It was actually here. But can I just back up a little bit real quick? I wanna answer that for you, but you were asking about external forces, we're talking about the great debate in my head. I mentioned to you that a lot of us don't see this coming, right? Like,
Yes.
what I have learned in my recovery in the 12 years, the growth that I've done, the learning that I've done, the therapy that I engaged in. I'm an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I truly believe in the process of the 12 steps. And what I've learned professionally now over the course of the last 5 years is that, in my opinion, again, I'm not an expert, but in my opinion, there's always something at the root of an addiction. Okay. Be it a mental health disorder, right? Be it trauma, A lot of times it's both, right? That's the case for me, right? I was diagnosed later on with bipolar disorder, which I'm treated for, and I'm stable and I'm doing great with that, for years now, how I used to self-medicate, not knowing that I was bipolar. So I used the alcohol and the drugs to medicate myself. And then I also had childhood trauma, pretty bad childhood trauma. A lot of people experience these things, unfortunately, at least a lot of the people who end up addicted. That's what I've seen. That's what I've experienced. That's what I've heard. And so for me, and I've also heard this repeated over and over again in the rooms of AA, in just in recovery circles in general, in our profession, is that by the time I discovered alcohol, right, alcohol was number one for me. I had experienced these traumas. I was going through this bipolar stuff that I had no idea I was going. Like I wasn't diagnosed, right? Yeah. I just know that one day I was really happy, and then the next day I would crash and be like really sad for no reason. Everything was fine. It was the same as yesterday. So when I discovered alcohol, it was almost like I could exhale for the first time. It took all of it away. It took it all away. The noise that I had in my head, and I know a lot of people that'll be listening to this, they're gonna be able to relate. If they're struggling with something, they're gonna be able to relate with what I'm saying right now. The noise, all that noise that I would constantly have in my head would go away. Right. That empty hole that I would walk around with, like I had this gaping hole in my chest filled with fear and anxiety, you know, that would go away. That would go away. And I would feel comfortable in my own skin for the first time, you know? And when I experienced that, I think quite naturally, right? I pursued it, right?
Sure.
I
Well,
didn't want to feel that other way. I wanted,
no, you latched onto something that is all of a sudden giving you this elation and this positive feeling, and you're able to control this mood swing of
yeah,
that depression or that low, right? That trench, and pull yourself out of it with a drink.
yeah. It made me feel whole and complete, right? And calm, you know? And I am not talking in the sense of, hey, let's have a drink and we're relaxing kind of thing and having a great time, because that happened too. I'm talking about if you want to know what I really fell for, what really caused me to continue to pursue the alcohol and create this dependence and this addiction that eventually would almost kill me. That's what it was. I just wanted to be okay. I just wanted to feel okay. And you know what? Initially, for a time, it actually worked. It was my solution.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Which,
In the beginning, that's the trick. Like, oh, wow, look, you got this. You, I don't feel too good. It's like anybody who has not been addicted. I just tell them, do you like coffee? Do you have a cup of tea in the morning? And just take that away, that little turbo boost of energy that you get to kind of kickstart your morning or kickstart your afternoon or restart, your evening for some people that are truly having 2 or 3 cups as they go through. And just take that away all of a sudden and see how you feel. As you know, personally, I'm not in recovery, but I really wanted to understand what not just the physical relationship that I personally have with alcohol, but also the social aspect, and it is real. The minute that you take something away, even in a social setting, I was out with some friends last night before a concert, and my friend, first of all, we had a whole debate on whether it was okay and his guilt of drinking in front of me. I said, "Whoa, absolutely. I appreciate you asking, but please, enjoy your wine. This is a, but just that piece of that social piece of him being aware, right? Or feeling a little guilty of him drinking in front of me was the first thing that I took away. But my true internal sense was like, man, I could really enjoy a glass of wine. Man, that would decompress. And then you're looking at somebody who may only have 1 or 2 drinks a week, but I still felt it. Now, I can't imagine for people that are truly having several drinks, multiple drinks throughout their day, and all of a sudden to go into a recovery mode. And for people who haven't ever walked away from any type of substance, nicotine, the normal substances that really don't impair our mental capacity all too much, try it. It will be awakening in just the small sense of what our bodies do in addictive substances. But then enter in strong substances, alcohol, drugs, the types of drugs that we are seeing today on the market, and they are built to drive relapse or to drive continued use. They're truly designing things.
oh, yeah,
In that
drugs today. Yeah, absolutely. So it worked for a time until it didn't, right? Until it completely turned on me, you know, and it started to destroy my life for at first a little bit at a time, and then it just got worse. And, for 9 years, I was in and out of the rooms of AA. As I mentioned before, I went to two rehabs. I did multiple outpatient. And, in AA and in recovery, you hear about, well, and in medical, documentation and studies, addiction is progressive, you know. It
Very progressive. Yeah.
never really get better, it just gets worse, you know. And as it does get worse, it destroys more and more, right? Were you gonna say
Let
something?
me ask you this. Early on, and you talked about bipolar, and I saw certain things with, growing up with certain family members that I was exposed to them, throughout their childhood. And the signs, right? And so for our listeners that are, have kids, especially those kids that are exposed to, substances and drinking at an early age, 13, 14, we all know that that's the age that things just start to become introduced into children's lives. And we obviously have a epidemic problem in our country right now of kids abusing alcohol and substances at an early age, that we see a lot of young people in recovery in addiction treatment centers. What are the signs that family members or friends early on would identify in possibly having a problem, and identifying, like, the early signs of, let's say, depression or bipolar? And what would they do if they suspect something? And I'm talking before even use. Like, how do we get in front of it? And what would you say to family members that are watching who are concerned, or maybe not even concerned, but want to be concerned, and we're bringing it to their attention today? What would you say to them?
So, I mean, I'm going to answer first by saying that I'm in no way an adolescent type expert or addiction interventionist. I appreciate where your question is coming from. The only answer I would give to that, or I can give to that, is that, for me as a teenager, I don't think my parents saw what was happening with me, not that they weren't paying attention. Okay. And what I mean is that and I can even speak to you about my own personal experience with one of my kids, and it happened during COVID. But just before COVID, my son's moods had started to change. You know, it's very tricky, I think, meaning the nature of teenagers anyway is to be moody, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
I want to be in my room, in my cave. Yeah, dad, they're moody. They're going through a lot. They're teenagers. All those changes are happening to them physically, the social pressures that they feel at school and outside. So when that started happening with my son, I could not decipher. Like I couldn't. Is this just him being a moody, broody teenage boy, or
Mhm.
is this actually experiencing some type of problem, like a depression here? Well, that latter turned out to be true, and it took me time to catch it, you know what I mean? So, I guess for me, it took me paying attention. Thankfully, I was already in this profession and, I had learned and I was more aware, I think, than maybe the average person. Um,
Sure.
so I would say you know, just always watch, right? Try your best to communicate and stay engaged, right? For me, I had to learn to again try and decipher: is this him just being a moody and broody teenager, or is this him actually experiencing some type of distress here or sadness? And I had to learn to open that conversation up, not
Yeah,
be
'cause it's not be just conversation. It's really, yeah,
like "What's wrong with you?" type thing. Hey, bud, can we talk?
yeah.
What's going on? Are you okay? I noticed whatever, can we talk about that? You know, and I was able to get him the help that he needed. So again, I'm not an adolescent expert, but that's been my experience with it.
But you have kids, and I have kids as well, and I think you really nailed on the piece of communication is so important. And at the end of the day, as parents, sometimes we truly have to put our parent hat on and say, you know what? I need to talk to you. I'm concerned, and here's what I'm concerned about. Oftentimes I think people don't want to have and ask the tough questions because some people, oftentimes, I think the hardest conversation to have is with our kids, with our loved ones, and it can go off kilter so quick. I know in my own daughters, they were brought into an unbiased. We brought them into family therapy to be able to have conversations and be able to look at things that, again, us not being experts in adolescence and bringing in the experts to check off the boxes to make sure that we were covering things that we might not cover on our own, and so I've recently had another friend, and their son had been thriving socially, in sports, in school, academically, and their reaction and their concern was, "We're drug testing you. Have a seat. You're not leaving until you pee in this cup." Mhm. Little extreme, maybe not getting to the conversational piece. And that goes into, what are the mistakes that people are making in trying to help loved ones or friends? What are the things and signs that you've seen in your interventionist role, or maybe even in your personal life, that actually pushed you further from wanting to make a decision? Oftentimes, I think, I don't know if anybody's at in my own personal life, I know until I've truly made a decision to make healthy choices in my eating style, get into the gym, you could have asked me to get into the gym all day long, and I wasn't going. It had to be an internal change and something within me where I saw the value of it. And so going back to the original question is, what mistakes do you see people making in their loved ones in getting them help?
It's a great question, and what I would say is every individual is different, right? Every family and family dynamic is different. When you said when you talked about your friends sitting their teenage boy down and say you're getting drug tested right now, and you said that might be a little look, ghost signed up. Yeah, it might you said that might be a little extreme, and I thought to myself, maybe not, like, I don't know that family. Maybe that's how they deal with things, like, head on, right? Like, well, this is what we're doing right now, right? And that's fine, and sometimes that's actually the right approach, because if you come at it from too soft of an angle, right, emotional appeal, sometimes will not work, right? So, anytime I work with a family, I take a look at the whole picture, right? And do my discovery of what the dynamics are like. What's been happening? What have you been doing? What are you doing right now? What's happening right now that caused you to reach out to an expert like me? You know? And as far as, mistakes, I mean, I always tell these families, like by the time they get to me, they're exhausted and they've done everything that they've known to do, right? Or maybe they've researched on their own. And I always tell them, you've done your absolute best. Like you've tried everything and I commend you for that. And now you're trying something new again, something different, right? So mistakes, I guess you can call them that, I would say that what we want to avoid when we're trying to help someone that we love, um,
Mhm.
accept help for their addiction or their mental health disorder or both is no escalating, which is easier said than done sometimes because let's face it, it's very frustrating, right? Like,
Very,
Okay.
very
To
frustrating.
wives, for example, wives that are just so tired, right? They're so like done of trying over and over and over again and the chaos that it's bringing into the house and the uncertainty, right? And they're tired, you know.
Tired.
I always try and just help to explain that escalating doesn't help. It just doesn't, right? Getting into an argument never leads to, or very rarely leads to a positive outcome, you know? Yeah. And I would say, arguing, confrontation, judgment, telling each other off, cursing, these things just, they don't produce anything but more negative consequences or just more negativity, right? They don't produce a good thing. So I teach the families I work with on how to approach it differently, right? You can still say what you need to say, right? And you can say it firmly, but you don't have to say it that way. Let's talk about how to say it differently. And not just say it here and there. Let's talk about communicating differently, and let's talk about doing it with consistency as we lead up to the actual day of the intervention and as you continue your journey. right? As you can see your journey. I hope that all made sense.
No, totally does. I know, again, in my own relationship with friends and loved ones, I took it very personally. I really took it personally, making the choice of a substance over the relationship. I offered to go to meetings alongside friends and loved ones. I offered to give up alcohol. I was willing to do anything because the relationship was so important to me. And I've never been in the type of relationship with somebody to where I was living with an alcoholic or somebody who was suffering from the use of substances. But I tell you what, it tore my heart out, and the love and care transformed into anger, frustration, and internal guilt even in me, and saying things that were out of context. And so I could have definitely used the help of somebody like yourself. And so in thinking about, as you bring somebody in and somebody comes to you and they're at their last straw, they've given their all, and whether it's been months or years, how do you actually prepare family and loved ones? And you're dealing with, and working with the person directly who is suffering from addiction. That's one personality. But how do you prepare a room of people for an intervention, and what does that look like?
Great question. So I was educated, trained, mentored in a couple of different forms of intervention. The one that I practice primarily is called the CRAFT method. The acronym CRAFT stands for Community Reinforcement and Family Training. And the reason, and I also took the Break Free method by Brad Lamb, who's a nationally recognized interventionist. The reason I chose those two and especially focused on CRAFT, it's because it operates under a principle that I believed in for a long time. And that is that the whole family needs to recover, right? Yeah,
Very true.
focused on the individual who needs, like, that's our goal, right? To get that individual help, but it's not the only goal, right? The whole family needs to recover. When I speak with my families, I tell them, like, if alcohol and drugs or both have become your loved one's obsession, your loved one has become yours.
That's so
Right?
true.
You're consumed by this, right? You're thinking about it night and day. You're worried about it.
For sure.
You're not eating right. You're not sleeping because you don't know where he or she is. All these different things. It's consumed all of you, so we all
There's
need
a
to
tremendous amount of energy. And for those listeners today that or with us that identify with that, it truly does take a tremendous amount of energy, and there's nothing worse than putting energy into something without a solution, without results. It is the most frustrating thing in the world, and definitely a piece that we hold ourselves accountable to, and can create our own stress, anxiety, sense of failure and guilt in the relationship with those that are truly suffering with the addiction.
And so what I go on to say to them is, so that being the case, right? We all need to recover, right? We all need, not just your loved one, we do. And how do we do that? We do that by changing what we're doing. We do that by changing ourselves first. And sometimes you'll be like, what do you mean? Why do I have to change? He's the one that's changing. No, no, no. Remember what I just said, right? You're talking to me because this has taken over your whole life, So yes, you need to change some, and some of what you've been doing is okay. It's correct. It's good. And maybe some of what you've been doing is not correct and not so good. So let's talk about these things, you know. So I put together a program, if you will, that I follow with every family. We use these packets that I created that we work off of. Again, we use that structure, but every family, every dynamic is different. So we adapt accordingly, right? We pivot accordingly. So we have 2 to 3 Zoom sessions with the whole team, the family or the intervention team, and leading up to the actual day of the intervention. And in those meetings, we discuss all the things in those packets from, okay, why are we here? What's happening? What's been happening? What's the history? What's happening right now? What are our fears for the future? And what are our goals here? We want to talk about these things. And why? Because we want to, on the day of the intervention, present a united front. Not just on the day of the intervention, but we want to get united here, right? We want to present the united front to our loved one and for each other. We have to support each other. We all have to be on the same page. It's really important. Because if on the day of the intervention, somebody breaks rank, if you will, right? That could give that person the opportunity to say, "You see what he just said? I'm not that bad." He said I can do this and I'm functioning this way. And so we all want to be a unified front is what we want to be. We're going to end.
Well, how do you present that unified front? I mean, what does that look like in the preparation leading up to the actual intervention? Is that a day of coaching? Is that bringing the family together in the same room and really getting to, ask them certain questions? What does it look like to get them on the same page? Because if you were to get my family in the same room to talk about crossword puzzles, they would have different opinions on how to solve for it.
Yep. And those opinions are going to come out, right? In those Zoom, in the very first Zoom meeting, we talk a lot about the presenting the united front
Mhm.
and what have we all witnessed, right? What's happening right now? What are our fears for the future? What is our goal here? Why are we doing this? Right?
Mhm.
Those are the things we're going to focus in on and we're going to discuss. And I'm going to get to know that family better. And we all have to get into agreement. We all get, this is what's been happening. This is what's happening now. This is what we need to see. We need this type of change, you know? Yeah, you were going to say something.
Identifying the shared common goal of we are here to help and you are here to lead in how that help because obviously that family, those friends are there because they have not been successful in bringing this person into the world of recovery to date. And so you're really taking the lead and being able to create that unified front. And usually it starts with love is the most prominent thing is that they have a shared interest of love, I would think. And then again, moving on from there on, probably, I would think, you sharing different methods and how you can work with this person based upon the type of behavior, maybe the length of abuse, and then identifying maybe certain traumas. Is there ever a time where you would actually not have somebody in that room, a family or a family member or a loved one, where you would physically ask them, hey, you know what? You could do more harm than good in this situation.
Yeah, actually, and I was actually going to go there. What I wanted to, though, say also part of that united front is also what are we as a family willing to do? What are you as an individual in that family willing to do? And what I mean by that is where do we need to change and how do we need to change? Where do we need to start setting boundaries, right? Because maybe this person over here has already implemented boundaries. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not participating in that type of conversation anymore. I'm not financially supporting him or her anymore. But then we have another person in the same room who is doing those things, right?
Yes. Yes.
That has to change. That has
Yeah,
to
the
change.
unification is so important, and, I remember and at a young age, I remember it, and this is without an interventionist, but, the heads up that we were all on the same page was if this person comes calling, no money goes outside. I don't care what the situation is, I don't care if they're crying, no money goes from you to that person, and we did have a unified front on that. Something that I truly didn't understand when I was younger and I remember being in college and getting that call from a family member out on the streets in tears and asking for money. And it was truly one of the things, if we weren't unified on that, that I probably just would have given in and sent the money. And telling somebody no when you know they're truly hurting, but knowing that that money is probably not gonna be used for the purposes of the things that you're being told that they're gonna be used for, and that that person is truly in a manipulation mode is so important to stay unified and take the direction of professionals like yourself.
And to answer your question in regards to, is there sometimes or are there sometimes, situations or interventions where we may exclude someone from participating? So they'll ask, they'll tell me who they want on the team, and then we have to talk about that. Okay, so
Mhm.
you mentioned your husband, your parents, let's talk about each one of those people and what their relationship is like right now with the loved one that you're concerned about, right? The identified love. I want to know about the history, right? And where that relationship is today, because oftentimes, addiction will strain relationships, right? Really, really badly at times, right? So that's one thing, right? I want to make sure that there's a good, strong history there that, that on the daily intervention, when we meet with this person, that they're actually going to listen, right? We call them strong voices of influence, right? People typically that they've known for a lifetime,
Mhm.
brothers, sisters, mom, dad, whatever. Now, if that history shows that it's always been a strained relationship, like a bad one, maybe one that would not be conducive to a good intervention, we might want to ask that person to take a step back. And we've done that, you know. Then I've had situations where I'll have the first meeting with the team that's already been chosen, and a person during that first meeting, is just maybe coming off. I'm thinking of one situation in particular where they were just like really not understanding the nature of addiction and really not interested in learning about the nature of addiction. They were totally judging that person. They were totally saying he needs to do this and he needs to do that. Even when I would try and talk about, well, yeah, but can we talk about the reasons why he's acting this way? Can we talk about why we're here? Right? Can we talk about the fact that an intervention is a conversation, not a confrontation, right? It's a conversation, and it's designed to be a safe space where everyone will be heard, right? Everyone, the identified loved one and everyone else in the family. It is not a place for recrimination and judgment. That's not what it so after having had that experience, I had to have a conversation with the person who's hiring me. I'm like, "I don't think that we really should have this person on the team." They may
Sure.
mean well, but they're probably going to sabotage, our efforts here, you know?
And what you're dealing with a lot of times is the manipulation that a lot of friends or loved ones have dealt with, and broken trust, right? Manipulation, broken trust. And this may be the first platform for some people walking into seeing that person for months or even years in some cases. And all of a sudden they think that this is common ground to be able to get out the last however much time since they last seen that person and
Mhm.
vent or unload, and
Yeah.
absolutely not the right time is what I've heard in the interventions. Really have to address those things internally, and do take the time, prior to leading up to the actual intervention when everybody is present, to address those types of things internally with those people, and then looking at yourself and why you would restrict somebody from coming in. I would imagine that if they continue to go down into that rabbit hole of, but they did this and they did that, that you would eliminate that person from the actual intervention. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we can't have that. And listen, don't get me wrong, as you were speaking, I was just thinking, part of what we're trying to do also, right, in this conversation, right? And we use letters, by the way. We use a love letter and we use a boundary letter. I could tell you about that in a minute. But we are absolutely not just going in there to express concern, right? We're there to
Mhm.
express love and concern. We're also there to express, hey, this is how what's happening with you. This is how what's happening with you is hurting us, right? It's hurting me as an individual. Yes, I'm concerned about you, but I'm concerned about all of us. So there is a level of accountability going on there, right? Not like
Sure.
you're doing this, you're doing that, this really sucks. No, 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 that's not where we're going. But we are
Mhm.
holding them to account, right? Part of this conversation is to create an impactful experience, impactful enough so that the person can take a step back and snap out of it for a minute and realize, you know what? I'm not just hurting myself. I'm hurting them. I'm hurting her. They're
I
right.
would think that the letter too is
Yes.
is is a way for people to stay on track and really put thought, because I mean, in my own frustration, I've unloaded. I've expressed caring and what I assumed was caring, but the reality is it was unloaded out of a mental download in the moment. Whereas that letter and that time to actually take some thought into the love that you have, but also, again, you had mentioned a love letter and then a boundary letter on this, like, if you choose this, then you can't be near the kids. Or if you choose this, you can't come into the home at 2 a.m. and just show up because you're hungry. We can't deal with that because we have work the next day, and it is creating chaos and stress and anxiety and heartache and all the things that this type of behavior. And so having that penned out, I would think really allows it to remain in focus of what that love is about, as well as those boundaries.
Absolutely.
What does that look like? As an example, I mean, and some people I could imagine want to write a novel on the love that they have for somebody, and whereas other people, it's probably just a few sentences. Where do you usually keep that in a room as you go through this intervention with the individual there?
So I provide them with a template right off the bat. It's one of the first things that I asked them to get to work on when we start
Okay.
to work together in preparation for the intervention. It's typically 2 to 3 paragraphs. We don't want the complete dissertation. We don't want this. No, no. But it's a great exercise in that there's like a cathartic experience that happens for them when they write these things down. You know, and it helps them to bring into focus, right? Like everything that they've been thinking and feeling, they're actually putting it down, right? And writing it down. And some people say that it has helped them with more clarity. They provide them with more clarity. What we're doing here, why
Yeah, I can
I'm
see
doing,
that. Yeah.
what has led up to this, right? And so, yes, so we want to make sure we're delivering the right message, saying what we want to say, right? Concisely, right? And with purpose, you know. And yes, it is a tool that we use to stay on point during what could be at times a very emotional conversation. So it's a great tool. It's a great tool. And I always have them, they print out 2 of each, one for themselves to read from on the day of the intervention, and one in a sealed envelope with their name on it that can be handed to their loved one. Also, on the day of the intervention, whether they accept the help or not, we want to leave that letter with them, right? So that they can take a look at it later and recall what was said during the
You
conversation.
know, that leads me into I've watched the interventions, several series that cover interventions live on TV, and I'm sure anybody who is struggling and trying to get somebody into their own intervention, you've seen those episodes out there, and for the people who literally walk in and walk out, maybe they've been there for a few minutes, but they got the letters in their hands, but they're gone. They're like, man, I'm just not ready for this. They weren't expecting it. They were totally blindsided, which, obviously, is a piece of it, right? Is to catch them kind of off
And
guard.
it's not always. It's not always. There's the
No,
invitation type. There's the invitational type intervention, and then there's the one where you surprise them. They're not. They don't know that it's coming.
and so I would think that in the surprise intervention platform, that you would have somebody at times that actually walks away, and for the family, friends that are part of that and see that possibly as a failure. One of the things that I remember you saying early on was, I meet them where they're at. And even though that might have been the first contact, that first contact may have triggered or cascaded into something further down the line where, what, they become ready to reach out, and that you're the person that they trust or a key family member that they have built that trust with. Have you seen some of that, or yeah, what would you tell a family that's like, wow, you know what? They're just putting the weight of the world onto the interventionist's hands. And like, hey, you sold me a car and this should be the best car in the world. And meanwhile, that car has a problem and it didn't go as planned and all that rests on you. Obviously, that's just irrational thinking to think that you are the silver bullet in the intervention, and so much does reside with the other members. But for those people who truly, want to point the finger and pass blame, what would you say to somebody in the event that it doesn't go as planned?
So a couple of things. I was really taught well. Like I feel like I was mentored by one of the best. My friend Trevor Quinones, and he was supposed to mentor me for 6 months, and I said no, I want to keep learning, and we worked together for 18 months. And so we prepare for that. We prepare for that. I pick 2 of the strongest relationships there. Right. Let's say
Yeah.
mom is one, and maybe big brother is another, and we
Yes.
prepare for that moment when their loved one decides that I'm done, I'm not doing this and I'm leaving. And I will give them verbiage, I will give them things to say so that they can pull their loved one back into the room, get their loved one back into the room. I was taught really well how to do that. And I'm happy to say that in all the interventions I've done over the last 5 years, I've not lost one person because you prepare for it, and you pick the right
Fine.
people. and they go after that person, hey, like, come on, man, it's not just about you, it's about us too. We just want to hear where you're at. We want to hear from you. Yes, we're all worried about you, but we're worried about our family too. Like, come on, that kind of verbiage.
Yeah.
And we've been able to talk people back into the room each and every time. Now, that doesn't mean that they've accepted the help each and every time, right?
Sure. No, but they've been willing to listen, move forward in the listening state.
Very
Or
reluctantly at times. Yes, yes. You just never know, like, even myself, I've been doing this for a time now, like, I might say in my head, like, "Wow, this guy is really not gonna accept the help today." You know what I mean? Like, we're really trying, and by the end of it, they accept the help. You know what I mean? Like, you can't predict is the point, you know? You can prepare. You prepare as good as you can, and then, to your point before, like, yeah, I was also taught, and I teach my families that an intervention is not a one-time, it's not a one-off. It's not a one-time situation. It's an ongoing process, right? It begins from our first meeting and it continues to the day of the intervention, and then it continues after, whether your loved one accepts the help or not. You continue to do the things that we've been learning to do. You continue to communicate differently. You continue to take care of yourself first, right?
Mhm.
Keep your boundaries in place, you know, take care of yourself, whatever that looks like, right? Get your own therapy, go to Al-Anon, maybe pastoral care, whatever, right? To better your life, get back to your own life, right? Um,
Mhm.
and you keep these things in place. And, so the point of all that is that the craft method works 65 to 70% of the time, meaning you
High
can get,
percentage overall.
yeah, high percentage when it comes to the numbers in this, in mental health and substance disorders, right? You can look that up. Craft method works 65 to 70% of the time. You can get someone to accept some form of help, right? But then even when it doesn't, like when it hasn't worked in that moment, I have received phone calls 3 and 4 months later. Hey, we kept doing the things that you taught us to do. We kept things in place. And guess who just went to rehab last night? So it takes work and it takes patience, but interventions do work. I wish I could say they work 100% of the time. And anyone who tells you that, you might want to check that person.
No.
You
Yeah,
might want to
of
check that
course.
person's profile out. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
No, I mean, anybody that's selling that, that's a red flag immediately. What I've seen and the experience that I have, with my own personal addiction was I can remember, cigarettes. I loved cigarettes back when I was a young guy. And it took literally probably 20 times to quit cigarettes, and that wasn't something that truly impaired my rationale or my thinking. And so to, think that you're gonna ha you're working with somebody whose rationale, whose thinking, whose level of functioning is truly impaired, don't think that, you're just gonna the first time out the door is gonna be the time. And so that really leads me into, you know, in the transition when somebody says, "You know what? I am ready to get help. You know what? I wanna take a shot at this, and I know that you're, affiliated with Alina Lodge, and I've gotten to see that the space up there and understand exactly what that program looks like." What should people be looking for in an effective treatment program, and what does that process really, what does it for and especially for people who've never ever attempted, to go into detoxification therapy, and I'm talking, with professionals who are trained in addiction, psychiatrists, physicians, nurse practitioners, a full staff who can support them. What does that look like the moment they say, "Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to take the next step"? What should the person be prepared for?
a big part also of what a good interventionist does as he's working or she's working with the family, as I work with the family, I'm also doing treatment planning, right?
Mhm.
And I'm trying to, as I get to know that person through their loved one's eyes, we come up with a plan that would best suit that person, right? I think about, who is this person? What are they like? What are their interests? What did they used to, enjoy doing before this took their life over? You know, are they, outdoors type people? Are they, adventurous type people? Like, in other words, try and line them up with a place that I feel they'll land and thrive in and do well in, you know. Of course, insurance also comes into play, right? We also
Sure.
have to look about the health insurance. Like, is this place covered by this person's health insurance? So the family and I, we talk about that, and you know, they have the input. Right, their input is obviously incredibly valuable, and we come up with two plans: Plan A and Plan B. Now, Plan A is often the inpatient plan, right? This
Okay.
person definitely needs physical to be safely, physically, medically detoxed from this substance, and then transition into what is called a short-term residential program, which it's typically 28 or 30 days. And then hopefully after that, they will continue on an outpatient basis for their treatment. So that's Plan A typically. We come up with a Plan B as a backup plan, right? Because we're going to try real hard for Plan A. But as you mentioned before, we do have to meet this person where we're at, where they're at, I should say. So
And
we may,
resources are a big piece of that, of course. I mean, if the person for some reason doesn't have, not everybody has insurance and not everybody is willing to provide the types of services in a great setting, providing, additional resources, outings, being able to lean into those passions. Not everybody can truly afford that. We
right,
have a gap in our insurance industry. So obviously doing a needs inventory and aligning that with resource inventory is so important.
correct, correct. So Plan B typically is an outpatient plan so that we can say to him or her, hey, okay, at the beginning of this conversation, we said that we absolutely wanted to hear from you, right? And we understand your reasons for not wanting to go inpatient, be it work, be it this, be it that, whatever. So if that's not good for you, if that doesn't work for you, what about this? And then we present Plan B. And now we are empowering that person even more, right? They definitely, they're being a part of the decision making process anyway, but now they really feel like, oh, okay, all right. And so we get them to accept Plan B, or we try, right? And if they do, great, right? Because some treatment or some form of treatment is better than no treatment at all. That's what I always say, right? We want to get a foot in the door, right? I always at the end, though, try to add, hey, but if this proves not to be an adequate level of care for you, you do agree that you then would have to go inpatient, right? If this doesn't work, you know? And of course, oftentimes they'll say, yeah, you know, they may mean it, may not mean it, but they'll say, yeah. And yeah, so that's part of what we do during the intervention process, get that all in place so that when they do say, yeah, we can get them right into treatment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw in folks is just getting them in the door to the treatment to be able to say, yes, I accept it. We had the resources available as a family to be able to support the individuals in our family. Friends are a little different. Not everybody wants to contribute. You don't have a role in their insurance and what type of insurance they have. But in the cases I know where we did have resources, still the pivoting point was I accept the help,
Mm.
and being able to internalize that for the individual to say, you know what, my family, my friends, my job, my career, it's worth it, and I need to take a step back. And I think for so many people again are in that space of, am I addicted? I'm only taking a couple lines a day. It's getting me through. I'm a lawyer, can't just step away from my career. But on the other hand, you come back home and your family is ready to push you out the door, and going back into the boundaries of individuals. And of course, the traditional detox, 30 days, we saw, of course, and we're in the space of providing sober living in a space where people can really take what it is that they're learning and working with somebody like yourself, and somebody in an inpatient treatment facility, and be able to transition that into a longer, being able to, really a medium where people can practice those skills that they've learned, continue to go down the role in outpatient therapy, and still allowing sometimes the family members or those friends the boundaries to say, you know what, I need more time. I'm not ready for you to come back into the home. I'm not ready for you to be around our kids. And some people may interpret that as, oh, well, you're asking me to prove myself. And the pushback that I've heard is, absolutely, you do need to prove yourself, because the damage that you're doing to those around you is intolerable.
Mm.
And so you need to make a choice, and we need to see that you're taking action in that choice. And sometimes it's not just, I think you've probably seen it. Oh, I've gone 28 days, I'm cured. That cured thinking. What would you say to family members, to the individual who's like, oh, and in 28 days, I'm done, right?
No, you're not. Uh, what I say, it's interesting. You just reminded me of a conversation that I had over the weekend with someone that I just started sponsoring in AA a few months, not a few months ago, a few weeks ago, but it turned out I happen to know.
Mhm.
Uh, it's a very interesting situation. He turned out to be the dad of one of my youngest son's best friends. Anyway, so I'm helping him now, and we were talking, and he's a great guy, but his mindset. He's definitely getting there. He's got like 60 days sober, and he's like, isn't it time for my wife to start trusting me and appreciate what I'm doing here? And I was time out.
Sure.
How long did you drink and carry on for? 15 years?
Yeah. And
60 days clean? I said, "See where I'm going here? Like, took you a long time to walk into these woods. That's gonna take you some time to walk out of them, you know? You need to show her some patience, you know, and cut her some grace, and give her some time, you know? Nobody's perfect in this situation. I'm not taking sides here, but let's
Mhm.
be real. Let's talk here. Let's talk some real stuff here. Like, you've been doing this a long time. It's gonna take you a long time to get your family's trust back. But you can, it's just keep doing what you're doing. Let's keep working on your recovery and, you know, give it time. Time takes time.
Time heals all. Action alongside time and produces results. And if somebody's truly in that space to allow you back in, which not everybody is, and that's the true, I think one of the outfalls of addiction is that sometimes we truly do lose the people who are most important to us, and sometimes we can't control the outcome of our actions and how those actions have played out on others. Some people are truly just done and are ready and need to walk away for their own perseverance
Mhm.
sometimes, which is oftentimes hard for us to internalize. What is a story of hope? We're talking about the struggle, and in your obviously you are sitting here before us, and you are truly a story of hope in your own personal story, and I commend you on that. But in sharing with another story, what really kind of comes to mind of one that you looked at somebody coming out of the ashes and is just thriving today?
Well, thankfully, I have a lot of them. I'm very happy to see that. I'm very happy to be able to say that because it's so rewarding. It's so I love it. I love what I do, and I especially love it on a morning like yesterday. And I shared this with you where I got a text,
Yeah.
like 8 in the morning, and basically, hi Joe, it's so and so, this person's friend who you helped to get into rehab a year ago today, you know,
Wow.
and she's
Yeah.
and she and she went on to say, because of your help and the grace of God, she said that, which I love. I have been sober a year today, you know, and here's
So
a
empowering, isn't it? It's like, wow, it's,
I love I love those texts. They just send me like it just sets such a beautiful tone for the rest of my day. I'm like, wow, this is why I do what I
yeah, you
do.
really need that and working in the trenches. Those are the things, similar to teaching, there's nothing better than having a student who comes back to you. Sometimes you're out there day after day, you're working in the trenches and you're like, am I getting through to anybody? Is this working? And is the passion that I have for what I am teaching and what I am sharing with people, is it really getting through? And that is total confirmation when you get a call like that or a quick text communication from somebody or a family member to say, "Hey, listen, you know what?" And I do recall, you share the context of it is it wasn't easy. There was a few speed bumps along the way, so don't think that this is just going to be, like it goes like this. There's pits and peaks and valleys in people's recovery, and it's different for everybody. You never know when you're gonna, be a 2 one day versus a 10, but in getting that affirmation of, you know what? I hit a year. I hit 8 months. whatever that is, whenever that comes, it's like, wow, you know what? This is why I do what I do. People do recover. And for those who are sitting watching, thinking, wow, I've given up all hope. I've tried everything. This is the opportunity to bring a professional in. This is the opportunity to change it up and try something different. Because if you continue down the same path, that's insanity. And it's on both sides. The person who is suffering in the world of addiction and the people who are trying to help. If
Yeah.
you're continuing down the road of, you know what, let me do this, let me blow up, let me just lose my, I'm gonna do it by force. I'm gonna power up. You know what? That's my style. I'm gonna power up and I'm gonna control the situation. That is a common style amongst military families is, you know what, you're powered up out in the out on the field. I'm gonna power up in the house and I'm controlling the situation. And you're out the door. And there's it's a black line, a black and white line often. It's not a black and white line. It's often a gray space in the world of recovery and getting people to see what it is that you are trying to communicate. And often if you just change it up a little bit and bringing in a professional like yourself and trying it. And if you worked with an interventionist before, don't be afraid to try a different interventionist. It's sometimes the personality, right, is just the key to aligning somebody. You know what? We have a lot of people who are Spanish speaking out there, and the cultural trust sometimes, and the fact that you do speak Spanish, is an important piece to some families in identifying the fact that you come from a Latino culture and understand struggles that other people may not understand.
Yeah, it can be. It has been helpful in certain situations for sure. Yep. Yep. Oh, back to this woman, who sent me that text yesterday. In that moment, I thought of her, but then I thought of her family too. Here's a middle-aged woman, teenagers, husband, and because she's sober, all those lives have been changed. It's just sobriety's can be really beautiful. It really can. Recovery
It
is
is
beautiful.
totally beautiful. Is very, very beautiful. And it's so many people have a different perspective and where they're at. I've been down to Kensington, down outside of Philadelphia, and you see people that are truly what would consider is with very little resources, very little hope. People who you would think that just there's nobody that cares about this person, and then I see people and organizations and churches, church groups walking through those streets saying, you know what, I care. I
Mm,
don't know you, but I care. I'm here when you're ready. I'm here.
beautiful.
Oftentimes what we're seeing is, people are so the drugs are so strong today. Xylazine is impairing people to where they don't even know that they're on this planet. They don't know that they're, who they are, what they are, who's in their lives, but they will come out of it. There will be what I call a glimpse of a clarity, even in somebody who are not going to be on that drug every waking moment. There will be a time when they are struggling, and there might be an opportunity that actually clicks back into their mind and goes, you know what was that church group that reached out to me? You know what? Let me make that call. Let me walk over to there. And so I love the fact that so many people in this industry never give up hope. They really don't give up hope. And it's so important. So important for us too, right? As
Because
working,
there is hope.
there is hope. Yeah, there
There is
is
hope,
truly hope.
and there is help. Yeah. I'm sorry, you were saying it's so important for us.
For professionals, right? As well in so many people, what I've noticed in this space is so many people working in this space to help others, that 12th step of giving back, right? And it truly lives in the spirit of people who are working in this space. So many people, whether they're doctors, whether they're counselors, interventionists like yourself, come from the world of recovery. I know that, when we were out visiting our campus in Lancaster, I was very taken back the fact that you knew somebody who is in our program in resetting themselves, but they had worked after their own recovery of, I want to say 17 years or so, that they had relapsed.
Yeah.
And the fact that you knew that person and had a connection with them outside and were able to just love on them, support them, and give them words of encouragement, because people don't know that at any time it's not, you can't let your guard down. And for people that are truly working in this industry with people, there is a tremendous amount of stress. There's a
Mhm.
tremendous amount of care. And we go home at night truly worrying and hoping and working to ensure that people regain control of their own lives and enter in recovery. And oftentimes, when you're in those trenches, we see first responders, especially first responders, veterans, people who have served, always caring for others, is that oftentimes we're not caring for ourselves. And if you're not walking into the fight with your hands up, you're gonna are more susceptible to relapsing. And I've seen it in my own family, and I've seen it recently in a friend of mine who years and years of sobriety. He called me just a few weeks ago, and I was not shocked. I was not shocked after working, but I was there for him and supportive, and we were able to get back on track. That's part of it. People think that the work is done 60 days. That initial thought of, wow, I got this. I'm good. I'm coasting. Absolutely
Mhm.
not. You really have to keep your dukes up and
Yep.
be prepared, because you don't know when that day is coming. You don't know when you're going to have a valley. Oftentimes in this industry, it's the loss of somebody,
Yeah.
loss of
Yeah.
somebody we worked with, and somebody we've gotten to know, or somebody in the industry who's been working alongside of us, and all of a sudden they relapsed. And to see that in person, and actually that happened real time, just a few weeks ago, and that was really moving.
This is why self-care is so important. And when I say it's so important, not just to those of us who are working in this industry and doing this type of work, because it can be very draining. And if you care, right, you love the people that you work with, the families you work with, it can really drain you. So self-care for anyone in this profession or in this circle, yourself included, is really important, right? The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says we cannot transmit what we don't have. We cannot transmit what we don't have. If I'm not well, how am I able to really be my best for this family or this person that I'm working with, or just show up for life, right? Like I don't mean just my clients, my family, right? My kids, my mom, my whoever that might be. So I think very important for people in what we do. But also I express this to the families I work with. You have to take care of you. You have to take care of you. And it's okay, by the way, for you to take care of you. You weren't put on this earth to just take care of the person who's struggling with the alcohol or the drugs, you know? So,
Yeah. And that goes into, oftentimes we see people that are not taking care of themselves, and they're not speaking up for themselves. And what we see is, sometimes people go into their own world of, not being able to communicate. That could turn into behaviors that lead into addiction in that other person's life as well. It could be addiction of prescription pills. I just recently talked to somebody who are like, yeah, you know what? Work's been so stressful that I've had to get on anxiety medication. And the first thing I asked her was, "Are you taking care of you? What are you doing to take care of you? Are you taking time out for you? And is that the solution or silver bullet that you expect to be able to solve this problem?" We often want a quick fix, but we're not looking at the root cause of what's causing this anxiety.
right.
And for people who don't have great communication skills, or are afraid to speak up to our loved ones, and just want to pretend like, "Oh, wow, I'm so happy he's back. Oh, she stepped back into my life. Oh, I'm just gonna deal with this, because I may not get an opportunity to share my life with somebody else." Or, "You know what? That's my son, and I'm just supposed to keep he's here. I'm just happy he's here." What would you tell somebody who's just afraid to speak up, and not really looking out for their own well-being and putting themselves first?
I would say to them that, and this is not original, if nothing changes, then nothing changes, you know?
Yeah.
And you are well within your rights, right? To want to take care of yourself, right? And you deserve that. You should do that for yourself, right? It's okay for you to speak up on behalf of yourself, you know? Let's talk about how you can do that, right? You don't have to be nasty about it. You don't have to yell. You don't have to curse. You don't have to get upset. You can say what you need to say in support of yourself, in defense of yourself. You can say that and then follow through on it, you know?
Follow
Yeah.
through. I think
Is
that's
there
an important point,
Yeah.
the follow
Follow
through,
through
because
on it.
oftentimes, we get up there and we say, "Oh, yeah, I got it. I read it." And then all of a sudden we fall apart, right? We haven't
Yeah.
we read the script, we haven't put it into action. We haven't
Mhm.
actually played it out in real time.
Right.
And, uh, and if you're doing that, for our listeners that find themselves there, that have found themselves there in the past, is, that's a great opportunity to have an honest conversation with yourself, with somebody that you trust, and to come up with a plan. And I would imagine that for those, and I'm sure you've had clients, friends and loved ones who've struggled with just that. How do you coach them through that?
Coach them through making
Just being
changes.
able to speak up. Yeah,
Yeah,
speak up and be able to, really, oh, I've got the boundaries now. I know what to do, but just not pulling the trigger.
right. And sometimes it could take some real work and repetitiveness,
Yeah.
a constant reminder as to why we're trying to make the changes that we're trying to make, right? Because they've lived in the situation for, such a long time that it's hard to break out, right? Like codependency is a real thing. You know what I mean? Like,
I did well.
yeah, it's a very real thing and it's hard to break free from, you know? Sometimes I encounter somebody who's really at the end, like, yeah, I am a codependent and I need to break out of this. Show me how, right? And we'll talk about, okay, what's going on, right? What's going on? What changes can we make, right? Um, you know, what situations do you no longer want to be a part of, right? What conversations you no longer want to be a part of? What do you want to put in place to protect yourself from all that, right? What changes are you going to require of your loved one? And what are the consequences if they don't? We need to talk about all that, come to some decisions, and then follow through. And that's where they need a lot of support, obviously, as well. Like, did you follow through? Right.
And that
You
can
know
be
what?
so hard sometimes, in the sense of, it may be physically locking somebody out while they're pounding on the door to come in. It may be calling the police, and getting the authorities involved if it escalates to that type of level. It may be taking your kids out of the home and out of the situation.
Maybe.
There's so many things that could escalate
Yeah.
that I've seen and read stories on and, maybe glamorized a little bit on TV, but,
You
it's coming
you know,
from
Vincent,
somewhere, and it is a reality. It is somebody's reality.
yeah, but Vincent, it doesn't always have to be that drastic, right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes I'll work with somebody who starts to make subtle changes, right? Like maybe we don't go right from here to locking that person out of the house, right? But maybe we go from here to saying to that person, you're no longer allowed to drive the kids anywhere. That's it. And if you do, there's going to be consequences. Like, I'm not going to let you do it anymore. What are those consequences? I don't know. I hide the keys, or maybe I call the cops if I know that you're under the influence, right? That's kind of a That's kind of a drastic one too, but sometimes very necessary, right? We don't want to let somebody drive our children under the influence of anything. It could just be a smaller thing. It could be something like, you know what? I like going to the movies with you, but I don't like the fact that you have to have 3 drinks before we go to the movie. And then you're sloppy during the movie. You don't stop talking during the movie. I just don't, it's not enjoyable for me. So I love you.
Yeah.
When you stop drinking, totally want to start going back to the movies with you. We have a blast when you're not under the influence. But
Yeah.
for now, I'm
I
not.
was,
So that's a more subtle change, right? That's a more subtle change.
yeah.
What I'm getting at is that you can make some subtle changes like that as you grow, as you start to break free from the codependency, as you start to set boundaries. And sometimes that'll be enough of a message to create change in your loved one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. The small little steps and not being so drastic. Not to say that drastic doesn't play a role, and because of behavior in the event that escalates into physical violence or something of that nature. Let's fast forward. Let's fast forward for a second, and for people that have truly done the work and they're further along, and we've gotten to a space of, you know what, we're reuniting, we're coming back together. I see the change. What can families do to ensure that relapse, does not happen? What can they do to prevent that as they go through this journey together? Because it is a lifelong journey. Anybody that I've met says, recovery is one day at a time, and you never let your guard down, and you continue to do the work. But what does that work look like on the family's part or friend's part?
To ensure, like I wouldn't use the word ensure, help prevent, right?
Mhm.
Because there's nothing is sure, right?
I
But
agree.
they can
Yeah, so
absolutely, yeah, they can absolutely continue to be supportive, right? And that comes in many different forms. I would say though that the very first thing has to be continue to take care of yourself, right? Support not just your loved one, but yourself and each other, right? Because we're typically talking about a few members to each family, right? And what does that look like, right? You continue your Al-Anon meetings. You continue your individual therapy. Mrs. Smith, who put up with this for 10 years and now he's recovered, and that's wonderful, but you still need to continue taking care of yourself, right? Family therapy, whatever that looks like. How do I support my husband, my wife, my ex loved one who's in recovery? Hey, how was your meeting? How was it? How's your friend who's sponsoring you? Do you want to go do something, right? Like activities that don't necessarily have to include alcohol, right? Maybe you're so supportive that even though you enjoy a drink here and there, that you've made the decision that, you know what, I'm not keeping alcohol in the house. I don't need it. I want to support my husband. I want to support my wife, you know? But yeah, just supportive measures, encouraging, you know, encouraging your loved one. Hey, you're doing great. I want you to know that it's been 3 months and
Yeah, words of encouragement. So
yeah, you look fantastic and I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you. Let's go have
yeah,
some ice cream. Let's go get some dinner. Fun stuff. It's the little things. You know what I mean? The little things in life.
it is the little things.
Single is the
It
big
is the
thing.
little things.
So, like everything had to be a big party and all this other. It's the little things. I love ice
You
cream.
know, what I saw in a good friend who spent 3 years in a state ordered recovery facility, and it was either that or 15 years of hard jail time, and
Mm,
in a space where I think most people would not stand by him in the outcomes that his use or abuse of substances created. But his family did stay by him, and, as we talk about, years later, what that was like, he recognized the fact, uh, and I get emotional about it because where so many people turned their back on him, his most valued people stood by him, knowing it was the hell that he had put them through. And today, to see the relationship, thrive, to see his kids grown, to see his transformation and his grace that he has in how he lives his life and truly the little things. And I think it is the little things as we come into clarity, not just into focus, not just in the person who is doing the actual hard work in recovering themselves from addiction, but the people around them and how that can really blossom as they move away from that type of behavior and what the possibilities are, the passions that they rediscover or discover. What oftentimes, I mean, the stories of hope that I've seen is like total transformation, total things just fall into place. All the barriers that they thought were keeping them from the greatness and beauty of life, it just like slowly eroded around them. And when you talk to them, it's as if those barriers are just no longer there. Not to say that there's not trials and tribulations of life, and all of a sudden you're in recovery and it's all roses. Certainly
right.
not. But the appreciation is very present, is what I've seen in folks that are truly moving through the recovery and allowing the people to come back into their lives and bridge those relationships that are so often important.
Yeah. In recovery, we talk a lot about gratitude, right? That's what you were just talking about. Gratitude and how in AA we say that a grateful heart will not drink again. If we're truly grateful for this life of recovery, what sobriety, the gifts of sobriety, which is countless, countless gifts. I often say I'm so blessed that I can't truly wrap my mind around how blessed I truly am. I'm so blessed.
Amazing.
It is amazing. Like, sometimes I'll sit down in the morning and just write out a gratitude list. And I'll just keep going and going and going. I'm like, wow.
Wow, right? My journaling is really amazing, I think, to look back on. And I was just talking to somebody in Lancaster who's early on in the recovery, and I was like, do you journal? And he's like, I don't journal. Journal? I don't have time for journaling. And I said, well, I'm not asking you to write a thesis. I'm just, and I'm not asking you to write about anything other than your feelings and where you're at and how you're doing and what it is that you're grateful for. And he said, I'll try it. Well, I followed up with him just a few days after that. And he said, I've been doing this journaling thing, Vince, and I only got a couple things written down, but you know what? I was not in the best mood. I went back into my journal the other day, and And sure enough, I found something that I might have missed if I hadn't written it down, and something that I was grateful for if I hadn't written it down. And I think that as you go through further along in this exercise of looking for the grace, sometimes we have to look for it. You were woken up and you're like, man, everything is just not in alignment. I'm off. I don't know why I'm off. Those are the days it's most important to look back into what it is that we're thankful for. And even for those that are not in recovery and supporting from somebody on the outside in of this, it's truly important for you to journal as well, because you're doing the work alongside them, and you may have a different perspective on what you're grateful for. But don't forget to make an effort to truly write it down. They say, verbally speaking it, writing it down enforces the fact, and releases. Truly, there is a release of endorphins when we can see, feel, touch it, involve all the senses, right?
Yes.
And so, and you're right, really on where the rubber hits the road and people truly making that decision, and it could be the difference in somebody continuing on the streets and continue to tear down those relationships that are so important, or even risk their life. There's so much out there that truly is like a loaded gun, and people who are providing that or in that world, they don't care. They don't care like the people that are willing to sit down in an intervention in that type of setting. And as they look around, they can internalize afterwards often of the people who are truly in their corner and going to bat for them. What a special experience. Any last things that you would leave our audience with? Any helpful reading? Any books? Any books? Have you read any books that have inspired you in your journey?
The biggest one would be the volume of Alcoholics Anonymous, which we lovingly in AA call the Big Book. Um,
Yep.
and then, of course, scripture, due to my beliefs. What I wanted, as you were talking, what I thought of was I just want to say, active addiction is about isolation and separation, you know, where active recovery is about connection, you know,
Yeah.
connect, connection with each other, right? Connection with our higher power, connection with other people walking the same path, right? Recovering. And that could
Yes.
be me, like the former alcoholic and addict who's in recovery, walking with other alcoholics and addicts in recovery, or family members of, right, who are walking with other It's about connection is my point. There is hope. There is help. You don't have to stay stuck. You know, addiction causes the person using to isolate, and it isolates the family as well. You can break out of that isolation. There's a way out. There's a way out, and there's a much better waiting for you out there, you know, a much better life waiting for you.
So true. Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time. I mean, wow, what an honest and powerful look at what it means to stand behind someone in their fight for recovery without burning out or breaking yourself down. And for our listeners, truly, if you were supporting a loved one through their addiction or considering reaching out to an interventionist, remember, you do not have to do this alone. Help is available. Hope is real. And for more resources, we're going to provide a link to Joe's services. We have other tools, treatment options available at the porchlightrecovery.com page. You can call us anytime. And if this episode sparks something in you, please share it with somebody who might need to hear it too. Thanks again for joining us
Right,
on
pleasure,
Outside In,
right,
Joe.
pleasure.
And Joe, if you could just share with our listeners your website and how to get a hold of you.
Yes, my website, joeortiz, interventionist.com, and my number is 732-599-7817. And I thank you so much, Vincent. I really appreciate you. I love what you're doing. Thank you for being a part of my journey as well.
Joe, you're a true friend. Seriously, I appreciate over the last few weeks and getting to know you. I feel that spark within you, and I really appreciate you sharing your journey as well as your expertise. And again, for those who are listening, if it's not Joe, reach out to somebody, make the call, connect with somebody. If you know somebody who's struggling, if you feel like you're not getting through to that person, get help. We'll be sure to include your link in the episode as well for anybody that is listening that would like more information. And as always, thanks again for joining us on Outside In.